Back in the 1800s and early 1900s, our US cities were covered in streetcar lines. Cities large and small invested in and promoted population growth through these light rail systems that went on to shape each and every one of their respective urban landscapes as we know them today. More specifically, our most walkable, bikeable, and dare I say urbanist neighborhoods act the way they do as a direct effect of the streetcar lines that once ran through them. And in Denver, their streetcar legacy lives on, largely in the infrastructure that was built around it, plenty of which still stands today. Denver was once home to one of America's largest, most thorough streetcar systems, mostly owned and operated by the Denver Tramway Company. Denver's streetcar system was nothing like its modern light rail system, though. The tramway operated a dense urban light rail system reaching into North, South, East, and West Denver and beyond. Just look at this map of the system next to Denver's present-day passenger rail system. There's just no comparison. And with Denver seemingly being the capital of park and ride, well, let's just say on my recent trip to the city, I was hoping to relive some of the magic of the past, so that's exactly what I set out to do. And as it turned out, there may not be a city that acts as a better case study for the legacy of the American streetcar and its role in modern neighborhood urbanism. So here's everything I found uncovering what's left of Denver's urban passenger rail past in the present day. If you're new to the channel, this is Fourth Place, your place to learn about US geography, urbanism, transportation, and city planning. Denver's streetcar legacy lives on in so many of its modern neighborhoods. Take the neighborhood of Berkeley, for example, located in the northwest corner of Denver's urban core. This place is never not buzzing with urban life, and for my money, Berkeley is the best neighborhood in the city, far and away, and that's by design. Berkeley's strengths lie most prominently on Tennyson Street, a former streetcar right-of-way. This street is peak Denver urbanism, only missing, like other neighborhoods in the city, the reintroduction of light rail. There's a healthy mix of urban renewal in the way of new, dense residential infill, as well as plenty of adaptive reuse. Tennyson Street clearly wasn't built to maximize car space, but rather acts as a main street built before the auto and for the pedestrian and streetcar, leading to a walkable, human-scaled, and bike-friendly slice of the city. You see, what makes neighborhoods like Berkeley so great is that these urban renewal and urban infill sites have immutable qualities that pre-existed the auto and were planned in such a way that is so different and often way more human-scaled than our contemporary residential neighborhoods and main streets. When streetcars were first introduced into Denver's urban core neighborhoods, the effect was near immediate with how they began to shape the places they traversed through into pedestrian-friendly, mixed-use communities. As communities like Berkeley started gaining population, they earned a stop along the route, which spurred rapid transit-oriented development. People wanted to live and open businesses near these stops, and as such, places like Berkeley flourished and prospered throughout the early 1900s. Berkeley actually used to be a town all on its own before being annexed by the city of Denver. Back then, the town formed around the streetcar line, and in the rapidly urbanizing decades since then, the town of Berkeley did not allow industry or large retail establishments within its limits, which is why the neighborhood continues to have such a human-scale charm to it. Unfortunately, as the streetcar went out of fashion and Americans turned to the quote-unquote freedom that they thought the automobile provided, these once vibrant commercial, residential, and civic hubs were left overshadowed and experienced heavy disinvestment at the hands of the more lifeless, car-dependent residential, commercial, and civic centers that dominate even Denver's urban fabric today. Thankfully, though, in recent decades, walkable, bikeable, and transit-oriented neighborhoods are coming back into fashion, as, naturally, people prefer being able to fulfill their necessities without having to pay for and operate a motor vehicle. And the secret sauce to success is that since neighborhoods like Berkeley, as well as a few others I'll touch on later in the video, already provided those pre-auto streetscapes, and were in desperate need of urban renewal, they became the most ideal spots for just that. And it's no wonder why places like them are thriving in the present day, sans light rail. And as long as a city like Denver continues to build upon those urbanist principles that these streetcar neighborhoods were founded upon, they'll continue to thrive for as long as the city exists. Berkeley is densifying, keeping its valuable neighborhood park, and growing its small business presence to all-time highs. I don't think I saw a single vacant storefront that didn't have a leased sign on it, and that's a great sign of a healthy neighborhood. These places offer the most healthy lifestyle, not for just walking, but also biking. On the whole, I was pretty impressed with most of Denver's bike infrastructure along its main streets and collector roads. Most of Denver's urban core neighborhoods seem to have adopted these bike and scooter parking stalls where automobile street parking used to be, which definitely encourages more bike riders. In some areas, though, I was less impressed with the markings and protections. It was largely hit or miss, but in these pre-car neighborhoods, the roads are just narrow enough where riding your bike isn't too risky, even without protected lanes. I think it's impressive, though. Largely because, well, when you think about it, this is Denver, a city in the Mountain West region of the US, not particularly known for its urbanism. It's a big city though, and having visited many of this country's big cities, I have to say, Denver ranks shockingly high in its overall urban core urbanism. Like more well-known urbanist cities like Portland, Oregon, Denver really has so many of these small, human-scaled mixed-use communities that are, in essence, the secret to its desirability and contemporary livability. And like Portland, Denver has used its former streetcar corridors to spur urban renewal developments that have been long overdue. Neighborhoods like Berkeley, Rhino, South Broadway, South Pearl, and so many more in the city are timeless. Timeless in the sense that they were first planned for human needs and human scale, and not the automobile. Timeless as well in the sense that they did not change with the advent of new technology, and that their traditional, walkable style has stood the test of time. The streets are narrow, with sidewalks and tree-lined. They were fronted by porches, balconies, and entries, rather than garage doors and driveways. We need to keep these places safe and sustainable by adding density, investing and incentivizing small businesses, and removing car space for more pedestrian, cycling, and fixed-route transit infrastructure. We need to keep places like these around, if for no other reason than the fact that they are almost impossible to build from scratch with today's planning and zoning codes. They need to be preserved, yes, but they also need to be added upon in people-centric, urbanist ways for maximum sustainability and longevity. Something else I found interesting in Denver's urban core streetcar neighborhoods were its neighborhood bikeways, an initiative that I think does more harm than good, ultimately. I'd like to make a full video about Denver's neighborhood bikeways one day, but my chief complaint is that it seems as if these neighborhood bikeways are the city's way of saying that a certain road or street is cycling friendly without adding much of any protected bike infrastructure at all. On most of the neighborhood bikeways I observed, there were typically nothing more than just painted bike arrows on the asphalt, which might lull cyclists into a false sense of security to think they're traveling on some sort of protected or prioritized infrastructure when they really aren't, which could lead to a further rise in accidents for possibly overconfident cyclists. And sorry for the blurry infographic from the city's website, but no, cyclists are not more comfortable on roads interweaving cars than they are in protected bike lanes. Mini rant pretty much over. And like I said, this is something I want to tackle in a full video at a later date. But I'm definitely not saying Denver doesn't have any strong neighborhood bikeways that do, tangibly, offer cyclists some comfortability and protection. Because I found that too, in perhaps one of Denver's grungiest former streetcar hipster neighborhoods, Central Denver. Specifically a street that was once Denver's busiest streetcar right-of-way, South Broadway. One-way vehicular traffic with two-way cycling traffic, dedicated bus lanes, and ample pedestrian space and crossings on a street lined with commercial retail and small businesses. It's without a doubt the best that Denver could do with this wide, broad commercial street that dates all the way back to 1865. Well, maybe the second best thing they could have done, as they still got rid of the streetcars, which is just inexcusable. And obviously, they should lose 2 center lanes of car traffic and re-implement light rail, The only two problems with this part of the city are lack of dense housing and homelessness, and as we all know, those things often go hand in hand. But rest assured, many of Denver's former streetcar neighborhoods have a lot of dense housing, especially the neighborhood of Rhino, short for River North, Denver's former industrial warehouse turned arts district. Thanks to Denver's ongoing urban renewal efforts, Rhino went from a bustling industrial center in the late 1800s to a neighborhood full of life in the present day, especially on Walnut and Larimer Streets, which is where the streetcars used to traverse. The neighborhood is highly walkable and very livable with a ton of new, dense residential buildings all over the place. Rhino is where you could find some of the city's best food and drink, and while the neighborhood was pretty dead at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, I hear this place is buzzing with life on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. While the sidewalks weren't crazy active at this day and time, Rhino's Denver Central Market was packed and bustling. You know, with Denver's ongoing rezoning of Rhino opening up a lot more mixed-use redevelopment, the neighborhood should continue to see a lot of growth. There are some great local businesses here, and I had a great time exploring the past, present, and future of this unique mixed-use neighborhood. But I want more. More housing, more adaptive reuse, more bike and pedestrian space, and branded scooter parking is welcome too. Oh, and of course, the reintroduction of light rail in the neighborhood. So, Denver's streetcar legacy lives on in the way it fundamentally shaped the city's most walkable and bikeable neighborhoods. But I bet you've noticed how I haven't yet mentioned anything about Denver's modern urban rail transit system yet. And yeah, that's because they barely have one, at least compared to the one they had 100 years ago. The NIMBY culture here is just as strong as any other Western American city, so it shouldn't be a surprise that Denver has really only built their commuter and light rail system in the park and ride variety, mostly along I-25, I-70, and US 85, which, as you know, urbanists just love. Rather loathe. While most everything feeds into downtown, I don't know. Having most of the stops in the middle of no man's lands, right next to the interstates, does nothing for neighborhood sustainability or ease of access for people without cars to take them to the park and ride stations in the first place. It's obvious that neighborhoods like Berkeley, South Broadway, South Pearl, and Rhino would greatly benefit from rail lines situated on the very land they once traversed some 100 years ago. On the whole, Denver is doing really well when it comes to mixed-use development in these former streetcar neighborhoods, and I would love to see some new light rail lines open to service them to make a car-free lifestyle truly attainable within and around them. Okay, so I can't conclude this video without mentioning my favorite neighborhood I discovered in Denver, Lower Highland, also known as Low-Hi. Except for the lack of light rail, this place is easily one of the most urbanist neighborhoods west of the Mississippi. You certainly wouldn't think so if you're simply looking at it on the map, seeing as there is a friggin' interstate running through it, but this place has everything you could want in a downtown adjacent neighborhood. Plenty of density where it matters most, especially along West 32nd Ave, Central 15th and 16th Streets, and a ton of mixed-use development too, especially residential mixed use on Platt Street and West 29th Ave. Density along pedestrian and cycling trails, density along commercial corridors, density in residential areas. This is, without a doubt, where I would choose to live in Denver if I could afford it. The neighborhood has a compact feel thanks to many of its main street zones, as well as limited surface parking, and an overall lack of cars. This lack of cars is thanks to its great biking and scootering infrastructure and culture. No matter when or where you're here, you're gonna see somebody commuting on bike or scooter, and it's really kinda awesome. An integral part of that infrastructure are the Highland Bridge and the two South Platte River Trail bridges, all three of which act as a pedestrian, scooter, and cycling-only pathway to connect Low-Hi and downtown Denver. The neighborhood is also home to some exceptional green spaces like the smaller Hirshhorn Park and the expansive Commons Park, both heavily used when I was there in November. Retail diversity is strong here too, and it really is just the best place in the city to be, day or night, for whatever you're in the mood for. Oh, and did I mention Low-Hi used to be crawling with streetcars? In fact, it's even home to the former Denver Tramway Powerhouse, which was previously used to generate power for the Denver Tramway Company's extensive streetcar network. Now, though, it's being adaptively reused as a massive REI and Starbucks. In conclusion, Denver really impressed me on my recent visit. Like many other cities in the US, its best parts were first shaped by the streetcars that used to call them home. Denver, though, is special. I feel like out of all of the American West cities I've been to, Denver's streetcar legacy turned walkable neighborhoods are the strongest and most abundant. The city's old urban rail infrastructure is hiding in almost every corner of its urban core in plain sight. If you decide to make a visit to the Mile High City, I very much encourage you to seek it out and uncover even more than I did. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next week from 4th Place.